Hard times leads to creative financing and creative weasels on today's Unnamed Real Estate Podcast.
Did that teaser audio sound off to you? Okay, we'll fix it in post. Hi there. This is Charles Ray Dawson, Associate Broker, Residential Sales Manager, ProStar Realty. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast, Episode 90. How you guys all doing today? So, my phone's going to be buzzing through this entire thing. I'm going to group text and everybody's chattering back and forth. So if I glance down, pay no attention to the man behind the phone. So how y'all doing today? Today is October 19th, and this is the winter of our discontent. So a couple things coming up on the news. We'll go to the numbers, and then we're going to come up with the various topics that just sprung up out of the weeds this week. But first things first, news is what the news is. More numbers are coming out about how bad the market sucks right now. Our sales overall, closings overall are down over 30% from this time last year, and still headed down with this. We actually, on the Cromford report numbers, we have officially flipped over in like the first time for forever. Just a little bit, but we do have more houses for sale than we have buyers, and that's not a situation where we've been in forever, right? You might remember from previous episodes, I'd be sitting there saying, you know, we got 100 houses for every 30 buyers, and that's why there's big. Well, now we're pretty much a 1-for-1 ratio, right? Just slightly under, not enough to be statistically significant, but we're pretty much for every house there's a buyer. Problem is that buyer doesn't qualify because they can't buy at these interest rates. So. And with those things, Gary Keller of Keller Williams, he wrote the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. He is a name in the industry. And as my broker is pointing out today, he wasn't the first one to come up with the teams concept, but he was the one who truly marketed the teams concept. And that's where you have a senior team leader and you start hiring on little underlings, minions to do all the scut work for you, like showing houses, writing contracts, negotiating repairs, that kind of stuff. And you just sit above it all, marketing yourself as this really together and with it agent. Meanwhile, in the back room, there's a whole bunch of, you know, basically very low paid team members who are sitting there scratching by while you're going to Cabo on the weekends. So anyway, so Gary Keller, who now runs Keller Williams and is, like I said, is a name in the whole business, he actually says that this is the worst market we've seen since the Great Recession crash. All right, and I have to agree with him on that. It's come down very, very fast. It does seem to be leveling out a bit in places, and we are going to cover that a little bit more in the numbers and everything. But yeah, it's just really starting to impact, and it's a little weird when you're sitting there and you're reading the national news and stuff like that, and there's still a lot of places that have just not at skyrocketing home values, and they've just sort of stopped and slow up, and you don't actually see that price drops that we're seeing. And we have 43% of all listings on the MLS have had a price drop, and I'm going to assume that the other 57% of those things have just been on the market in the last week and a half, or they have sellers that are in denial. I'm tracking a couple properties here that have been at the same price for like easily over 3 months now. They're wondering why their house hasn't sold. So price drops are also a thing, and you know, that's where we're at right now. Let's go take a look at the numbers real quick, and we'll talk about what's going on with that on the other side. So numbers this week of October 19th, 2020. Actives week are 20,579. That is up 277 from last week. Our new listings were 1,999, which is down 59 from last week. Pendings are at 1,137, up 41. Under contracts looking for backups is at 605, down 25. Contracts with the buyer's contingency is at 92, which is just up 1. And remember, we had 2 consecutive weeks of 91 in the previous weeks, so not a lot of changes there at all. Closings this week were 1,346, and coming soon to an MLS near you is 593. But the big numbers today, of course, like I referred to earlier, is that our demand right now is at 79.8. We have 79.8 buyers out there, where in a normal market we'd be having 100, right? And we are still low on supply, right? We are at 80.6, where we normally would be having, 100 houses. We only have 80.6 of them. This active number right here based on our population and normal rates of house churn should be at 25,000. So we're still showing lower than what we should be, but ultimately we don't have the buyers for them anymore. So we are balanced out. If you work the numbers on that, that makes the actual Crawford index report puts it at like 99.7. Right, so it's the first time we've been here in a very, very long time. So that's how we're looking at the market at this point. So when these things happen, and remember, this is all pretty much being driven by the fact that buyers disappeared when the interest rates took off. All right, interest rates are gone. All right, and remember, previously we didn't have people putting their houses on the market, because why would I put my house on the market? Where would I go afterwards? That was affecting our supply on that side. They didn't have a house to move into. People of a certain generation were still staying in their 4-bedroom, 3-bath house when the kids had left because they didn't want to downsize to another one, opening that house up for the new buyers, and so on and so forth. And now the sellers are still sitting there going, why do I want to sell now and get rid of my nice cushy 3% loan to sign on to a 7% loan or a high 6 loan? So that, of course, is affecting, why we do not have as much listings as we should, as many houses for sales as we should, even though, we are looking at numbers at the highest we've seen in some time. And of course, buyers can't afford to buy because those house prices are still high from the last 2 or 3 years run up that we had, the spectacular last 2 or 3 years run off that we have. And, we are in a very, very slow market. One of the lenders I was talking to this week pointed out to me that if you bought 5 years ago, all right, and now you're looking at sell, you are still way ahead of where you bought 5 years ago. All right. Yeah, we're coming down, all right, but we're effectively just acting like in the last half of 2022 didn't happen. All right, so you're still ahead on your loan, and you're still ahead on your house. You just are not going to see those rates. And the problem is the human psychology, the human mind. We are actually engineered to care more about loss than about gain. Don't know why that is. I've heard various theories on it, but you can sit there and test people out about whether or not you'd rather get $5 or lose $5, right? And you can get $10 and lose $5, and you'll obsess about the $5 that you lost and forget about the 10 that you had. It's one weird things that we make up. So a lot of people, when they sit there and they think, hey, yeah, I bought this house for $300,000 and now it's only worth $450. But it used to be worth $525. I've just lost $75,000. No, you hadn't. You're still ahead from what you initially put in. But that's not the way people think, all right? And real estate is a people game with human beings. And some of those human beings are assholes. So let's talk about the weasels, right? I was sitting open house this weekend, and I got a call from an investor who wanted to talk about, ironically, the house that I was standing in the middle of. And he wanted to know whether or not my sellers would be willing to accept an offer called a subject to offer. Right? And what a subject to offer is subject to is a offer where the seller is still going to maintain the loan on their property. Right? That loan will not be paid off by the seller when the buyer buys it. And in doing so, the buyer, it will set up a system where that loan will be paid, and you don't have to worry about it, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, because I'm going to make sure that deal's all taken care of. All right. The problem with this, and the problem with the subject to loan, is that a subject to loan means that you already have and still have a mortgage on your record. So these subject tos only work for people who are not looking at buying again. All right. So if you're sitting there and it's like, I'm moving to a retirement home and renting a retirement home, paying that, then maybe a subject to might work for you. But if you're looking at moving somewhere across country and you're looking at living there and buying a house, cross country, you're not going to be able to buy that house that you just moved to because you still have a loan on your, on your record. And that's where subject to start getting a little weird. I know of a case a couple of years ago, way back in the crash era, I got a call from a guy I used to work with, and he had gone into foreclosure. He was about to lose his home, and somebody came in and basically came up with a deal that was based on a subject to financing. He just came in and said, "Hey, you know what? I'll pay you $10,000 to get out of the house, pay your debt off, to get it right size so they're no longer trying to foreclose on your house. And you sign the deed over to me, and I'll just rent it out, make your payments. Bob's your uncle. Everybody will be happy. You can walk away from this and not take the foreclosure on the head." Sounds pretty good until that landlord, all right, the guy who just bought this house from my guy, could not, for whatever reason, make the loan payments, or maybe he just didn't care to make the loan payments. So that house still wound up going into foreclosure. And because it still went into foreclosure, my guy took the hit, and he has a foreclosure on his record. That's the danger of having a subject to. All right? So just for the record, I was not advised by this guy this is what he's doing. Like many people I know, they called me up after things had gone crossways and said, "Ray, help, what can I do?" It's like, well, you could have called me a year ago and we could have taken care of this and gotten you out clean, but now you're pretty much screwed. So, moral of this story, you know, when in trauma or in doubt, call Ray and give a shout. That's not bad. I just thought that up on the top of my head. So the next deal that we got going on, which is a term that we're starting to hear on the real estate, is not a subject to, but the next one is called a wrap. All right. And what a wrap does, and I might be wrong on this one because I've never done one and I'm not as learned on this, but we're definitely researching the hell out of this, is a wrap is where the buyer comes in and takes a second loan to purchase the house and takes the payments on the second loan and the first loan, puts the two together, and has one servicing company pay both of those off. You can also get a wrap a lot of these times where if you got a little bit of seller carryback going on there and the seller's not getting all the money up front, they're just getting payments made to them consistently. All right. You can also see a wrap go that way. Strangely enough, these used to be the way people had to do properties, right? If you're sitting out there right now and you have an interest rate on your loan of, you know, number I heard today, 3.2, right? You were paying 3.2% interest on your loan on a property. As a buyer coming in, I would love to be able to pay just 3.2 instead of 7. That's literally more than half. All right. So a wrap can sort of kind of help a buyer coming in get that loan at that rate. And there's ways to do it, and it can be all written up. But once again, you are now taking your credit score and handing it off to somebody else to protect. It makes me really, really twitchy, right? Not a big a fan of that either. But this is the way things used to work, right? So it's just another golf club in the bag, another tool in the toolbox, another analogy wrapped up in an enigma. It's just another way of doing real estate that exists out there. Where things start getting weird is when you have investors who are coming in and saying, "Hey, let's do it. You know, I can buy that place from you subject to full price, you know, no closing costs, da 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 da, as long as you're willing to sell it to me subject to." All right, so watch out for these things. And like I said, if you start hearing one of your friends or family start talking about how they're going to sell real estate, all right, and somebody's going to buy their house using a wrap or a subject to, warning flags. Make sure they know exactly what they're getting into on that. All right, wraps and subject tos are not for children, and you can get in a lot of trouble on them. Now, that being said, what you can do, if you're trying to sell a house and you got an FHA or a VA loan, I do know you can do this for VA loans. I've been told several times that FHA loans can do this. Not too sure about that, so I don't have a high level of veracity on that particular little comment. But I know you can do this with VA loans. If you were a veteran and you have bought your house with a VA loan and you were sitting there on one of those smoking, you know, 2s or 3s interest rates, and you suddenly come up and you have another veteran who wants to buy the house, and they're also using a VA loan, that veteran can assume your current loan and will write over into their name and everything like that. All right. Some mileage may vary on this thing. You might have some issues with that because I don't know if this has been fixed, but I know family members who had an issue where they allowed somebody to assume their VA loan that eventually got foreclosed on, and that credited against their VA benefits. Not sure about the details on that, but that's definitely something you're going to want to talk to, like Pat Diamede, lender from second episode I ever did. All right, he is the VA loan god of Arizona. All right, but this is ways you can do this, and if we can get more of these loans becoming assumable, where somebody wants to come and definitely wants to buy, maybe they're willing to do a second to purchase for equity coming out, or they have cash to make up the equity, and they just want to take that loan and get that loan, that loan at the low rate, we might be able to start doing these things going on. This is going to require a very, very knowledgeable lender. All right. And this is something the conversation you're going to want to have with the lender before you even start looking at houses. Right. So a couple tools are what we're dealing with and doing with to get rid of housing whatnot. Third option. All right. I know Steve doesn't watch this, so I'm going to say this third option. You can rent the place out if you don't need to sell. If you do not need the sale, all right, depending on your price point, if you have a property, I mean, let's use my house in case, all right? I'm in a 2-2, right? Just about 1,000 square feet. It's a tiny little house, right? I also could rent it out for $1,800 easy. And I could spruce it up and probably rent it out for $2,000 because of my neighborhood, all right? My mortgage payments are under $1,000. Right? I could cash flow my house today if I don't need that equity out of that to purchase my next house. Right? This might be an option for you too. Not real estate agents' favorite option. We're all about buying and selling. Most of us don't do renting, right? But for you, the consumer, all right, you have surplus property. It might be best for you from a cash flow standpoint to rent it out if you don't need your equity out of it. So start thinking along those lines, especially if you got one of those smoking deal, low interest, right? And you are past that point. Some people had to write sign documents saying that was going to be their primary residence when they moved into it for X amount of years. But at a certain point, you're going to be able to rent that out. So start looking at that as an option. That way you can write out the bottom, right? And then sell when we're at the top of the market. We're back into a seller's market. So just ideas out there. And that's what we're all about. We're about the ideas here at ProStar. It is Wednesday. The sun, you can tell by now, it's already almost 4 o'clock. Recording this on Wednesday because I'm not going to have time to do it tomorrow on Thursday. So that being said, you guys have a great weekend. Watch your kids and pets around water. Work your circles. And I will talk to you guys all later.